Welcome to today's deep dive. Imagine for a second that you're sitting in a hospital boardroom looking at a utilization dashboard for your radiology department.
And, the metrics are probably all glowing green.
Right, exactly. Patient throughput looks incredibly optimized. By all the standard executive measures, you're basically looking at a well-oiled machine.
But then you take the elevator down to the clinical floor.
Yeah, you walk into the actual radiology suite, and that perfectly green dashboard reality just shatters. Your top clinical experts are drowning in operational friction.
I mean, they're missing critical safety protocols.
Totally. They're scrambling to manage administrative chaos just to keep the lights on.
It is the absolute definition of a systemic operational disconnect. And for you listening, we've designed today's deep dive as a highly professional clinical operations briefing.
A briefing tailored specifically to your strategic interests. Our mission today is to explore a paradigm-shifting framework called H-CREM 2.0.
Which stands for the Human-Centric Radiology Operations Model.
Right. And we have a fascinating stack of sources to guide us through this. We are pulling from the official H-CREM Executive Blueprint, some strategic pitch decks, and a highly revealing descriptive analysis of a LinkedIn poll.
And that poll surveyed actual frontline radiology professionals, which is crucial.
It is. Our primary goal here is to unpack what the creator of this framework, Fathima Hasan Mohamed, identifies as the perception gap.
It's this incredibly dangerous blind spot in modern healthcare. The executives see peak utilization, but the frontline radiographers are experiencing severe workflow friction.
Yeah, and we should establish the stakes right up front. I mean, this isn't a briefing about just plugging in some new AI tool to read x-rays 5 seconds faster.
No, not at all. This is about fundamentally rewriting what the blueprint actually calls the operational constitution for radiology.
Which is a bold term. But we are looking at how deploying mechanized governance can protect the cognitive sustainability of the staff.
Right, and resolve unmeasured latency in the system, while also securing constant audit readiness.
So let's start with the heart of that perception gap, which the sources call the visibility void.
The visibility void.
Yet the blueprint highlights a staggering statistic that, frankly, completely reframed how I view these departments. Even though radiology suites are packed with the most technologically advanced imaging hardware on the planet.
Right, multi-million-dollar MRI and CT machines.
Exactly. They are operationally fragile. According to the data, 40% of a radiographer's shift capacity is currently lost to administrative noise.
40%?
Yeah, 40% lost to operational firefighting.
I mean, almost half of a highly specialized clinician's time is being absorbed by tasks that have absolutely nothing to do with patient care.
Yeah.
They are out there tracking down missing lab results, managing scheduling bottlenecks, finding wheelchairs.
Basically acting as manual logistics coordinators.
Exactly.
It's like hiring a Michelin star chef, but forcing them to take the reservations, bust the tables, and fix the broken dishwasher while they're trying to cook.
That's a perfect analogy. The food might still come out eventually, but the chef is going to burn out in a week.
Right, and the quality is definitely going to slip.
And we have concrete data showing that the quality is already slipping. The H-CREM poll series analysis gives us a window directly into this frontline reality.
What did the poll actually show?
Well, the data shows that daily scheduling frequently ignores human workload entirely. It just treats the staff as infinite resources. But the truly alarming finding is regarding protocol adherence.
Oh, right, the protocol drift.
Yes. Under intense workflow pressure, 70% of radiology colleagues noticed protocol drift.
Protocol drift. I mean, that sounds so sterile in a boardroom, but on the clinical floor, it's anything but. What does that actually look like in this context?
Well, in radiology, protocol drift means deviating from the strict, standardized steps required to safely image a patient. It literally means the erosion of clinical safety. Maybe a technologist is so rushed they take a slight shortcut on patient positioning. Or maybe they don't double-check a specific parameter before running the scan because, the waiting room is overflowing.
Because they're just trying to get through the backlog.
Exactly. When the department is slammed, the cognitive tax becomes so incredibly high that systemic human fatigue just sets in.
And the sources emphasize that safety systems in these environments still rely heavily on individual vigilance. Right.
Completely.
So the whole system basically relies on the technologist simply remembering to do everything flawlessly while managing total chaos.
Yes, and the poll data also highlighted that downtime preparedness is wildly inconsistent.
You mean knowing what to do when the hospital's computer systems inevitably crash?
Right. Some staff know the backup plan, some don't. which just multiplies the chaos.
So the entire department is functioning on individual heroic coordination. You are expecting your staff to just work harder and faster to manually patch the holes in a failing workflow.
And the industry simply has to evolve beyond that. Which brings us to the core solution the H-CREM 2.0 framework proposes.
Right, the shift to governed autonomy.
Yes. It advocates moving away from passive tools like standalone scheduling software or basic electronic health records. It introduces what the blueprint calls the logic layer.
So H-CREM 2.0 essentially acts as the operating system of radiology.
Exactly. It uses a 6-layer modular stack to unify human expertise with agentic AI.
Okay, let's talk about the architecture of that stack.
It includes a workflow layer, an agentic layer, a sentinel layer, and a sustainability layer. And the whole thing is designed to take the burden of orchestration completely off the human.
Wait, hold on. Handing over the operational orchestration of a high-stakes clinical department to autonomous agentic AI.
I know, it sounds concerning.
It sounds like a massive liability nightmare. You're talking about systems making operational decisions in a space where life and death are quite literally on the line. How does this not end in disaster?
That is the immediate and honestly entirely valid reaction any hospital executive would have. But the creators of the H-CREM framework preemptively solved for this liability.
Oh, so
Through their 3-layer architecture for trustworthy AI agents, they designed it specifically so that the AI is never running wild or making unilateral clinical choices.
okay.
It breaks down the AI's autonomy into strict, logical boundaries.
Walk us through those boundaries. How does the architecture actually keep things safe?
Well, layer 1 is intelligence and planning. At this level, the AI just observes the clinical signals.
So it's reading data.
Right. For example, it reads the HL7 data. That's essentially the standardized digital language that hospital computers use to talk to each other about patient admissions and lab results.
Got it.
It also monitors the PCS streams, which are the massive medical image files flowing through the department. It takes all that in and proposes an operational plan.
Okay, so that's layer 1. What's layer 2?
Layer 2 is action and execution, where approved logistical plans are carried out. But the real linchpin here is layer 3.
Which is governance and oversight.
Correct. Which is where the guardrails are strictly enforced. Layer 3 maintains strict clinical safety thresholds and permanently incorporates a human in the loop.
So the system perceives the data, proposes the logistics, but it functions entirely under mechanized governance.
Exactly. It is literally mechanized governance as a service.
So just to be perfectly clear, it's orchestrating the logistics, moving the puzzle pieces around, not diagnosing the patient's illness.
Yes, that is the core distinction. And it cannot execute high-risk operational changes without explicit human validation.
That makes a lot of sense.
To visualize how this actively closes that visibility void we discussed earlier, the framework maps the entire patient journey using a 10-level taxonomy.
So it tracks every single action signal by signal.
Right, to ensure nothing falls through the cracks. Levels 1 through 3 handle pre-suite intelligence.
Which is essentially getting ahead of the friction before the patient even steps foot in the hospital, right? It's doing referral validation and arrival sync.
Exactly. So if a patient is scheduled for an MRI with contrast, but their recent blood work shows severe kidney issues, the system catches that contradiction at level 1 and flags it.
Oh, wow. So it resolves the bottleneck days before it takes up valuable suite time.
Exactly. Then, levels 4 through 7 are dedicated to in-suite orchestration. This monitors the actual pulse of the room, tracking scan times and post-scan observations.
And then levels 8 through 10 cover the inside cycle.
Right, which handles the automated routing of the reports, triaging urgent results to the right physician, and formatting all the data logs.
Here is where the real-world application gets really fascinating for the frontline staff. I mean, mapping 10 levels of workflow sounds great for a sterile boardroom presentation, but
How does it help the radiographer?
yeah, how does this mechanized governance actually aid that exhausted radiographer we talked about earlier?
Well, the sources pivot to a concept called skill-based talent allocation, and this is driven by the H-CREM capability map.
Right. This seems like one of the most direct applications of protecting staff bandwidth.
It really is. The system does not look at an incoming patient as just a generic scan to be placed into an empty time slot.
It actually analyzes the live case complexity.
Yes, and actively matches it to the specific competencies of the staff who are currently on shift.
There is a fantastic, highly specific visual of this in the pitch decks. Let's say an emergency CT case comes through the trauma bay doors,
Yeah.
and it requires a highly complex stroke protocol.
Right.
In a traditional setting, whoever is next in rotation or whoever just happens to be standing nearest to the scanner might have to take that case.
Which is terrifying if they aren't a specialist in stroke imaging. That leads to massive stress and potential errors.
Exactly. But with H-CREM 2.0, the system instantly cross-references the live capability maps of everyone on the floor.
It evaluates their certifications, their recent case history, and even their current workload.
In the visual provided in the deck, the system looks at all that data and recommends the best match. It specifically selects a radiographer named Elias Thompson.
Right, because his profile shows he currently holds both advanced CT and emergency badges.
So it ensures the right radiographer is assigned to the right case every single time.
And the downstream effect of this is profound. By assigning complex cases to the staff who are mathematically best equipped to handle them, you change everything.
And it automatically routes routine cases, like a standard outpatient knee x-ray to junior technicians.
Exactly. The system actively prevents cognitive mismatch.
I really appreciate that term, cognitive mismatch. It perfectly describes that sinking feeling of being totally overwhelmed by a high-stakes task you aren't prepped for.
Or, conversely, being completely understimulated by repetitive busy work when you have advanced skills.
Right. Protecting that mental bandwidth directly lowers burnout.
And if we zoom out from the individual radiographer and look at the entire department, this capability map feeds directly into the operational control tower.
Which is this live 3D overview of the entire department's throughput, staffing, and safety incidents.
Right. And its primary function is to resolve what the blueprint terms unmeasured operational latency.
Latency is the perfect word for it. It's that invisible compounding lag.
Yes.
It's the 5 minutes spent waiting for a transporter, the 10 minutes looking for the right contrast dye, the 3 minutes rebooting a frozen workstation.
And visually, they seem totally minor.
But they eventually compound into a 3-hour backlog in the waiting room that the executives only see after the fact.
Exactly. But because the Agentic AI is constantly monitoring the live data feeds and the 10-level taxonomy, it can see that compounding latency before the human operators even realize it's happening.
So the system generates actionable recommendations.
Right. It might suggest reallocating a specific technician to the CT scanners due to an impending spike in volume. Or it might autonomously delay elective MRI slots by 30 minutes.
Doing all of this before the backlog actually manifests on the clinical floor? That is incredible.
It is predictive resourcing instead of reactive firefighting.
But, if the system is routing all these patients dynamically and constantly shifting resources, my immediate worry is safety.
Sure, moving faster in a hospital usually means breaking things.
And you cannot afford to break things when you are dealing with radiation or powerful magnetic fields.
Yeah.
There is a quote from the source material that really struck me, actually.
Oh, which one?
It says, "Safety isn't a checklist. It's a live system."
Yeah, that might be the defining thesis of the entire H-CREM philosophy. In many modern hospitals, safety still relies on static pieces of paper.
Or digital checklists that depend entirely on human memory.
Right. But the H-CREM safety and risk intelligence layer transforms safety into an active, deterministic system.
The blueprint gives a high-stakes clinical example of active risk prevention that makes this incredibly clear. It details an MRI Zone 4 breach.
Ah, yes.
For context, Zone 4 is the actual room housing the MRI magnet. And that magnet is incredibly powerful, and it is always on.
Right. If someone walks in there with a metal object, a wheelchair, an oxygen tank, even scissors in their pocket, it is a catastrophic hazard.
A potentially lethal hazard. The metal literally becomes a projectile.
It is arguably one of the highest risk environments in a hospital. The sources detail that if the H-CREM system detects a person near the magnet bore who hasn't cleared the proper screening checkpoints.
It doesn't just send an urgent email.
Right.
Or log an incident report for a manager to read tomorrow.
No, absolutely not. It triggers a logic-gated system interlock immediately.
It can literally lock the physical doors. The breach prevention is active and instantaneous.
Exactly.
But wait, if the system is constantly monitoring everything, from scheduling conflicts to Zone VA breaches, doesn't that just create a different kind of burnout?
You mean alarm fatigue?
Yeah, alarm fatigue is a massive issue in healthcare. If every slight delay or minor protocol drift sets off sirens and pop-up notifications, the staff will just become desensitized.
And start ignoring the system entirely. Yeah, the designers anticipated that exact problem.
So how did they solve it?
They solved for alarm fatigue by creating the escalation ladder. which operates on a spectrum from RSO1 to R10.
Okay.
It categorizes every single operational issue into distinct tiers, utilizing highly deterministic, logic-gated authority cascades.
So human attention is only demanded when it is absolutely necessary.
Yeah.
How do those tiers actually filter the noise on the floor?
Well, Tier 1 represents low operational risk. Let's say there is a minor scheduling conflict or a slight delay in a patient arriving from the ward.
Right.
The system handles this quietly. It's an auto alert that logs the conflict in the background but doesn't blare alarms at the staff.
So the AI might execute reversible actions on its own, like sending an automated prep reminder to the ward nurse.
Exactly. The radiographer doesn't even have to think about it.
So the administrative noise is entirely filtered out at that level.
Yes. Moving up, Tier 2 is for moderate workflow bottlenecks. This tier is assistive.
Assistive means
The system detects a compounding delay, say the CT scanner is running 20 minutes behind, and it proposes a solution. It might suggest resequencing the next 3 patients.
Oh, I see.
It presents the plan, but it requires a one-click human accept to proceed. The human is still in control, but the cognitive heavy lifting of calculating the new schedule has already been done.
And then Tier 3 is the hard stop.
Tier 3 is high clinical risk. This is the MRI Zone 5E breach scenario we just discussed, or a critical PASIAS system failure.
At this tier, the workflow is locked.
Yes. It requires explicit, deliberate human approval and physical intervention from an authorized leader, like a lead radiographer or the trauma unit on-call physician.
So there is zero delay in critical decision-making because the authority cascade instantly routes the alert to the exact person with the credentials to solve it.
Exactly.
You know, that tiered approach perfectly ties into the compliance aspect, too.
Yeah.
Every single one of these actions, the Tier 1 auto logs, the Tier 2 approvals, the Tier 3 interlocks, is continuously recorded.
Yes, the sources emphasize that this logging provides real-time automated JCI compliance.
For those unaware, JCI, or Joint Commission International, runs massive, highly stressful accreditation audits on hospitals.
Right. But with this system, radiation safety, dose monitoring, and staff credentialing are tracked effortlessly, creating structured audit trails in the background.
The hospital is basically constantly audit-ready without the staff having to do weeks of frantic manual paperwork preparation.
It completely flips the paradigm of audit readiness from a retrospective scramble to a continuous, passive state of compliance. The data is always there, and it's always accurate.
Conceptually, this all sounds amazing. But let's be real, the reality of hospital IT is notorious.
Oh, definitely.
Rolling out an operational constitution and an entirely new operating system for radiology sounds like a massive disruptive headache.
Usually, yeah, the projects take 3 years, millions of dollars, and they completely paralyze the department during rollout.
But the blueprint claims they can deploy this framework using a remarkably fast 12-week roadmap.
They propose a very strict deployment schedule, divided into 3 precise phases. And the speed is really only possible because of how the phases are structured to ensure trust and minimal disruption.
So phase 1 covers the first 4 weeks, focusing on blueprinting and void mapping.
Right. They analyze the department's specific risk calibration and identify where their unique visibility voids are located. It's pure observation.
But phase 2 is what really caught my eye. They call it the Sentinel phase, running from weeks 5 to 8. The AI is essentially put into shadow mode. Why shadow mode instead of just turning it on?
Shadow mode is arguably the most vital step for gaining clinical buy-in. During this phase, the AI operates in the background, handling only Tier 0 to Tier 1 tasks.
Okay.
It is analyzing the live data and generating its recommendations, but it isn't executing them. It allows the clinical staff to see the system's accuracy without feeling threatened or disrupted by it.
So it proves its competence silently.
Exactly. You are building psychological safety and trust among highly skeptical clinicians before the system is ever allowed to make a tangible decision.
I really love that approach. Let the machine prove it can perfectly handle the low-level administrative noise before you give it the keys to the orchestration tower.
Once that trust is established, Phase 3 is the final activation, covering weeks 9 through 12.
This is full orchestration deployment.
Yes, where the AI begins actively managing the capability maps, the escalation ladders, and the predictive resourcing. It's also when they begin strict ROI benchmarking.
They have to prove the system's financial and operational value immediately.
Which brings us to the ultimate end state of this entire framework. Everything we've discussed is engineered to power what the executive sources call the sustainability flywheel.
Let's break down the mechanics of that flywheel. It's built on 4 foundational pillars, basically creating a cyclical chain reaction.
The first pillar is the staff shield. By utilizing mechanized governance and skill-based allocation, you fundamentally protect your clinicians from burnout and cognitive overload.
You are actively absorbing the administrative friction.
Right. And when you shield the staff, they operate with higher precision and speed, which directly drives the second pillar.
Asset maximization.
Exactly. Your multi-million-dollar imaging machines aren't sitting idle because of unmeasured workflow latency. They're running at optimal throughput because everything is perfectly orchestrated.
You are getting more scans done per day safely.
And maximizing those assets while shielding the staff naturally produces the third pillar, workforce resilience.
Right, because you have a team that isn't experiencing 70% protocol drift due to sheer fatigue.
You retain your top talent because they feel psychologically safe and supported by the system. You eliminate the massive costs associated with staff churn.
Finally, when you have protected staff, maximized assets, and a resilient workforce, you achieve the fourth pillar, which is revenue reclamation.
You're reclaiming that 40% of lost shift capacity. You're operating at peak utilization in reality, not just on a superficial boardroom dashboard.
It becomes a closed-loop system of operational excellence that pays for itself.
It is the realization of true digital autonomy in healthcare operations, moving a vital clinical department from fragile, heroic coordination to robust, governed orchestration.
We've covered a tremendous amount of ground in this briefing.
We really have.
We started by looking at the exhausted frontline radiographer battling the visibility void, where nearly half of their capacity is lost to administrative noise, while the executives think everything is running smoothly.
Right.
We unpacked the H-CREM 2.0 logic layer, seeing how the trustworthy AI architecture acts as a new operational OS without ever removing the human in the loop.
We explored how skill-based talent allocation protects cognitive sustainability.
Ensuring Elias Thompson is assigned to the complex stroke protocol, exactly, and how the system actively resolves hidden latency.
We saw how the escalation ladder turns safety into an active interlock that secures continuous JCI audit readiness, all implemented via a shadow mode rollout to build that sustainability flywheel.
It's a comprehensive, highly strategic vision for the future of radiology operations.
It really is. But if we pull back one final time, synthesizing all of these sources, it leaves us with a profound implication for the industry as a whole.
Oh.
Fathima Hasan Mohamed's framework doesn't just change the radiographer's day, it completely rewrites the executive's day. So I want to leave you with a final forward-looking thought to ponder as we wrap up this briefing.
Good so.
If AI-driven frameworks like H-CREM 2.0 can perfectly mechanize operational workflows, predict latency, and handle the daily administrative firefighting, well, how will the fundamental definition of clinical leadership have to evolve?
That is a great question.
When hospital directors and lead radiographers are no longer managing daily chaotic crises, but are instead overseeing autonomous, self-correcting systems, what new strategic frontiers will they be able to conquer?
It's a fascinating shift from being crisis managers to becoming true systems architects. It really is a completely new frontier for healthcare leadership.
Well, thank you